Here we go. Merry Christmas, everybody. Why am I blanking on Christmas music now? I was going to sing something and I'm like, it's the most wonderful time. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's not technically Christmas yet, but it's the Christmas weekend. Make sure you can hear us. Make sure you can see us. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's definitely hasn't been a wonderful week for Tesla investors, but it's a wonderful day anyway because we're surrounded by our awesome community. So welcome, everybody. Welcome all. Welcome to the thing. So anyway, Remo, Borghand, Kuba, Brian, Olaf, bro. Like we're just right on. We're right on theme. I love it, dude. This is so amazing. So lots to talk about. We're going to spend the next hour or so discussing probably most of it is going to be the space that Elon Musk was at yesterday on Twitter, which got a lot of attention. And I think a lot of retail investors were like, thank God, finally, we got something to hang our hats on to move forward. And yeah, so it's going to be very exciting. And then towards the end, what we'll do is we're going to try a new thing with our community. So we're going to do about an hour. And then afterwards, we're going to take the discussion to a private Discord. So we have a private Discord, and then we're going to, potentially expand the pool of folks as well that are part of the community. They're not necessarily, they don't want to be on camera or they don't want to be discussing this. And we'll have another hour to an hour and a half of discussion there. So if you want to join us there, consider supporting the channel through Patreon or YouTube. Otherwise, just come hang out. Drop your questions in the comments, your comments in the comments section, and then we'll take it from there. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Who has some thoughts? Who wants to kick it off? Because there's a lot to talk about here. So who wants to share their thoughts first? I'll open it up to the panel.
Sure, I'll go for it. Yeah, I thought the Twitter Spaces thing yesterday was fantastic. And I think it should be a regular thing. I would prefer, I don't mind if he doesn't show up at any further earnings call and he just does the Spaces. That's fine. And if he did it like every couple months, I think it was great. And it definitely was a way of calming retail shareholders. At least I felt that way. And I thought the forum was great. I did note a couple things, and when I was watching. So all that is great. I'm really happy. I bought more shares yesterday. I held my nose, but I bought more shares, and I will sometime today. I'll do it again. But three things kind of stood out to me. I didn't like the fact that he kind of froze out Gary Black, because it came to his question, and that was kind of where it terminated. And I don't think it was coincidence that he terminated right at Gary's question. I didn't like the fact that he still kind of dismissed responsibility for the most recent share drop. He kind of went back to his macro analysis and asserted that. But, Tesla in the last 30 days is amongst its own, let's say. Its performance has been singularly bad amongst the marketplace. And I think just dismissing it like it's all macro, I think that's not a reasonable way of looking at it. But three, here's my still biggest concern. I see Twitter basically the equivalent of like crypto. So the way I mean is that it's designed to be decentralized. You don't want the government to control speech. So in this case, Elon, in effect, runs Twitter, and he's also the main communicator on Twitter. And that is not providing a forum for free speech. That is dominating free speech. If he wanted to run Twitter, then I think the result is he has to take a much more passive role in communicating on Twitter. And I think that's the fair resolution. As now, he's still dominating and we still suffer the consequences. So I'm with him. I'm supporting his Twitter movement, but I wish he didn't communicate on Twitter with the frequency that he is, because I don't think it's fair to everybody else.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for those thoughts. Anybody want to add anything there? I have a few that I have in mind, but I want to make sure if anybody wants to go. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. So, yes, it was calming. There was some, the commitment to not sell for at least a year. That's a good thing. If he had made that decision just after he did the last sale and just came out right away and said, I'm not selling anymore, maybe that would have helped us not go down another, 40 Yeah, because it was at 170, I think, when he did the last sale or something like that. So he immediately came up and said, "Okay, that was it," publicly, not just here. You could have done it, not just in the Twitter space. You could do it. So that, I'm great that it's happened, but it, the whole technical chart damage would have been less. So, again, it would have been nice if it happened earlier. Good to happen now. Still, ultimately, big picture, it's more down to, the stock and the actual execution performance. So if January 2nd comes out great, because you have like the Lambert guy from Electrek coming out saying, "Oh, need a PR tower, need a PR," like, and then he says it's going to come out with 415K deliveries, 220K deliveries in January 2nd. So, that is where things hinge. Like, did they produce the cars? The rumors of 100,000 in December in China and stuff like that. So that's the big swing, right? Where I think that Troy Teslake has it utterly nailed on that. So this is just going to the fundamental thing of like, how do things execute and deliver? From my view on Twitter is that, yes, he wants to get the free speech and things like that. But I also think, he sees it as a means to make, a lot of money. Like yes, there's a couple of, WeChat and some other things in between, TikTok, in between him and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube up at 3 billion some users. But a properly run Twitter with video, with short video, with WeChat payments, that can grow to 1 billion some people. Unfortunately, that means he'll be even a bigger target, because if it's not in line with the whole Democrat mainstream, whatever thing, then he's on the other side of it, and the attacks, will continue. But, Fox News has survived fine under all that attack for decades. Yeah, so I think it's more making money, that getting the creator content stuff, making money, so that, us who are on YouTube can also go over there and make money, and then to get the payments, 250 million people on payments, 90 million in PayPal. So if he gets even half to go over, we're bigger than PayPal on that side, and that's worth $90 billion. So it is something where, those who underestimate Elon, saying, "Oh, he can't do it, can't whatever," is that there's certain levers he can pull. Once he stabilizes the ship, he gets, as he says, to break even next year. He's going to have the programming and stuff to say, build this, build this, build this. That will, a little bit of code that, we do payments now, and a little bit of code we, have better creator content, do better videos, get that monetized. So the tweaks on this fixer upper of a thing is something that he can take and make huge. And the interaction that I see on the Twitter side with SpaceX, because SpaceX will start launching Gen 2 satellites, which are there was another company that they launched, which to put one demo satellite with a large fold-out array, 50 some square meters, something like that can communicate directly from ground to Earth, low Earth orbit, about 2 megabits per second, maybe higher, which is the same as an Iridium satellite. So Iridium has 50 satellites up there. They do and there's several other companies that do ground to Earth satellite communication, but they do it from higher orbits with fewer satellites. So sorry, I'm going to rant on this thing. But if Elon launches a few thousand of those other ones, he's 100 times bigger than Iridium. But the bigger deal is that when you add up those things, he can do virtually unlimited text and voice with a few thousand for all the T-Mobile customers. So then, but the thing is, low bandwidth, relatively low bandwidth, but still, several thousand at 2 megabits per second with an ordinary phone, not a special satellite phone. And what's short messages? Twitter's short messages. He can backbone his entire thing, unblockable, his own provider gateway. He can make his own phone. One, he gets more T-Mobile guys on. So you're paying, say, $10 a month or $20 a month. He splits it with T-Mobile and any other company he does it with. And then he signed up the other guys, Verizon, Orange, all that stuff, right? He splits, okay, you get $5, I get $5, or you get $10, I get $10, depending on how much people go. At a fully deployed Gen 2 satellite thing, which could take 2 years, if he gets the Starship going, then he can offer 2G, 9.6 kilobit communication everywhere to 1 billion users. So that's monstrous. And the number of customers he'll be dealing with, and if he has a Twitter thing as his front and center, right, for communications, then he's got his.
So you're viewing the Twitter play as like just a long-term telco sort of like.
It weaves in really, really well with the telco side. But also like he's going to, Tesla, SpaceX are going to hundreds of millions of people, right? Like, by 2030 we'll say 100 million Tesla users. But the SpaceX side with Starlink, and then with the ground to Earth satellite communications, he can get to 1 billion in a hurry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And the power of that is insane. The power of that also would explain, if I don't think the political people see it because they're not thinking about it, but it's the kind of thing where the Elon punches in combinations, right? That in Tesla there's the insurance, FSD, whatever, those things combined. The Twitter communications and the SpaceX satellite stuff, those things are powerful 1-2 punches, right? So the people who only look at it from this advertising and whatever stuff, and they don't look at, because he has so many pieces. It's like, yes, you could have said, if Elon only had Twitter back before he had SpaceX and back before he had Tesla, then you could say, you're looking at the most dangerous entrepreneur with nearly $1 trillion worth of resources, with 70% of the satellites in the world in orbit, 90% of the launch capacity. And then you're saying, I'm going to bet against him because he can't figure out advertising. Like, what the fuck? Sorry.
Yeah,
but,
fair enough.
But it's like so. But the Twitter SpaceX combination is intensely powerful.
Yeah. So no, that's amazing. No, thank you so much for providing that insight, because I myself had a hunch that there has to be some sort of interplay between his organizations, because he's been so good at outlining over the long term how these things fall in together. And Twitter was sort of the nebulous one, but that's a piece right there that makes a ton of sense, and it would bring a lot of value, especially to developing nations, for communication, and bringing them into the rest of the, call it the metaverse, or where people hang out and talk. And now we've added essentially a few billion people to that conversation. So that's extremely powerful. Remo, Kuba, or Olaf, any thoughts? Twitter space, Elon, Tesla, what Brian just dropped on us. What are you guys thinking? Who wants to take it?
I can take it.
Yeah.
Quick technical question is, because I see, Brian, that you thought about this satellite to ground communication, but as far as I understand, it will only work if you have view of the sky, right? So that's quite a big disadvantage when it comes to comparing to 2G, when it works in the buildings as well. Or am I wrong?
I think I have to check the Iridium, but I think you can work in a building. The worst case, you need some kind of antenna. So at the lower speed, I can get satellite, before I could get, you have to take the satellite dish outside. So maybe you need clear line of sight to the thing. But if for texting, it would cache, right? And then if you were to work on your ground station stuff, right, which they, each of the Starlink things is basically a ground station, you could have it rebroadcast to reach inside buildings, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And,
and
it's about the Twitter space, Farzad. Elon said it twice that he didn't miss any important Tesla meetings in that time, and that the team is doing really well, and that they're working on new products, etc. The execution is fantastic. So I got a feeling that maybe it's a case that he's a bit like emotionally not in line with all the retail investors, because from his point of view, everything is really great. What are you guys worried about? Tesla is doing great. You have buying opportunity, so just bite the dip and calm down. And possibly that's maybe what was on his mind. But it seems that he changed his mind, possibly due to the relentless complaining. And possibly that's why he did the space, I think. And I also wanted to say that Ross was conducting himself really well during that chat. I was surprised because he was getting quite annoying recently, and changed the tune a little bit.
Shout out Ross.
Yeah. And he became quite supportive, and when he was talking directly to Elon, he was a bit more polite.
Yeah. Well, knowing Ross, I mean, I've talked to him a couple of times. He just strikes me as a really good guy. He really is. He's just, and this is in no slight to him whatsoever. He knows how to drive attention, and he's a good looking dude. So he's going to be in front of the camera shouting, from the sky, and he's going to, bring the attention and drive a message that he thinks is important. He has a marketing and ad background, so he has a lot of experience in doing that. So I think it's just a lot of what we saw with him was, I don't want to call it an act. I think it was just a way for him to really drive his message in the most powerful way possible. But then, from my experience, when these guys get in front, face to face, they're just dudes. They're like, hey, listen, like, this is how we actually feel. So I agree with you. I think it was awesome. And then I also loved on Twitter, because Elon was like, maybe you should read the what is it, Exchange 101 book, and then he posted a picture of himself was like, hey, I stayed up all night reading it. So like, it shows the characters, like, hey guys, like, it's important stuff, but in the end, it's not like, I don't think the individuals that are critical or are bashing, like, quote unquote Elon, they're not doing it out of malice. I think they're doing it because they legitimately feel like there's a gap, and they're doing it in their own way, in their best way, to bring attention to it.
On the Twitter exchanges, I also liked when Meet Kevin said that, stop it, guys, I cannot have my daddy and my boyfriend fighting. And Ross replied, who's your daddy?
Yeah. He's hilarious. He's so funny. I agree with you too on the point of there's some disconnect between Elon and how the retail investor feels, because he sees it every single day, but we don't. And that's the problem, because all of a sudden he's like, hey, this is a new thing now. Bye. And then he goes missing for a month, and we're all like, what the hell? What the hell happened? And he's dude's like, okay, so are you like stupid? You don't think Tesla's going to do great? You don't think I'm going to meetings? What are you guys thinking? And it's like, I think that's the mentality that might be, for right or wrong. And it's more like, hey guys, like, I've taken you to the place before, I'm going to take you there again. Chill. But I think once you have a retail investing community and people that are legitimately concerned, there is disconnect. So I agree with you too. I think him going on the spaces was a recognition of that gap, for sure. At least a step towards that, to try. And I wonder how much the board was like, okay, Elon, like, we're getting a lot of pressure. Like, what's going on here? Like, let's do something. Let's give them a little bit of attention at least, and get them sort of re-engaged into what it means to be a Tesla investor potentially. So, Rema, I saw you come off mute. What are some of your thoughts? And plug your channel. Well, you got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I run a YouTube channel as well about Tesla, Bitcoin, minimalism, all those good things. Yeah, first of all, Farzad, thank you for creating the supercut. It really, saved me a lot of time. I wasn't able to catch the live.
I did it for you.
The live space. Yeah, I really loved like the share buyback thoughts, because personally, I'm also not the biggest fan of a share buyback right now. And to really reiterate that the strong balance sheet position that Tesla is in right now, right, with no debt, 20 billion plus in cash, it's really important now to have that cushion, in my opinion, to have the margin of safety to be able to invest full steam ahead, and to also be able to weather all the storms. So I really loved that. And just a question for all of you guys. Has anyone been looking at the short interest? Are we seeing some kind of uptick in the short attack, or does anyone have any info on that?
So all I know is that the short, and Richard, you might be able to help us here, that they get reported every couple of weeks, and I don't think the new stats get reported until the end of, I think maybe sometime next week. Do any of you guys know that data?
Yeah, I think it is reported, but again, it's not accurately reported because there's synthetic shorts and then there's shorts that have been eliminated. Before we started, we were speaking because I'm involved in a case against Fidelity involving short selling, and it's my impression that right now Tesla is currently being shorted more than any stock on the market right now. And that's reflected in the sale price and the volatility in the sale price and the speed of the drop. And what happens clearly is they short it, they reach certain price levels, people get margined out, that increases the pace of the decline, and it's all a vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm. Olaf, tell us.
Hey, yeah, lots of great insights on the call for sure. For me, the lithium refinery in Corpus Christi was obviously a big one for me. Like, wow, that's cool. Like, that's actually happening. They said typically it's a 7-year run rate for that, but Elon's aiming for 2, which is crazy, just right up Elon's alley. And another thing that stuck out to me was that prior to the cuts that he was making, Twitter had about a 4-month runway at the burn rate that they were going. So, going from 8,000 to roughly 2,000 staff, like that obviously changes the game at probably their highest expense. So, and then also the thought of like, we as outsiders can like look at what Elon's doing and think that it's taking up, 90% of his time or 100% of his time. In reality, like, even if it was 100% of what a normal person's time is, like a 40-hour week, that's still not even half of what Elon's time probably is. So it's nice to hear him reassure that, like, I'm spending a little time on Twitter, but it's not everything. Like, I'm not missing the important meetings and all those other things. Of course, like we've mentioned, the quote of like no selling under any circumstances in 2023 is a huge thing. And another thing, just from my background, like I'm a technical person. I run a streaming company for a living. So I get Twitter Spaces is providing a good value, and like I'm super happy to have Elon there. But there are a couple technical things that just drive me nuts, like people jumping the line and unmuting themselves, and that kind of whole thing needs to get sorted out. And then some sort of compression or normalization so the audio levels are not like all over the place. Like, those things would be super helpful and easy things for them to solve.
That's it on the technical aspects of the streams. Wouldn't it be cool if they make the next earnings report on Spaces rather than the old antiquated telecommunication technology?
I wonder if they would have
step
to
forward.
Yeah, I wonder if they would have to go to both places because of legal, but I'm not sure. They might have to have a traditional infrastructure because certain guidings and earnings need to be reported a certain way. But yeah, I would love to see it on Twitter as well.
As soon as the Twitter is the master one, and then the voice is beamed into the telecom line, then fine. Not the other way around, because that wouldn't solve anything.
Yeah, no. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, so there were a couple other things in the call that I found interesting. One was when there was discussion about 2023 Tesla vehicles, production, et cetera. There was a dichotomy between volume versus profit.
Yeah.
And Elon was asked a lot about that. And I think in the end, he said he deferred to volume over profit. But we should understand that if he's saying he's deferring to volume over profit, we could expect margins in 2023 to be significantly lower. And I think he was kind of laying that out. I found it interesting that Gary Black said that he was more interested in volume and his partner was more interested in profit. And they had a split internally. I thought it was also interesting when he was asked about the $30,000 car, he referenced that this was not a place for discussion of new products. He didn't say that it wasn't in the pipeline. He kind of suggested that there was going to be another time where it was going to be discussed. And I thought that was very optimistic. And number 4, there's a issue of the inventory, the cars in inventory. And I saw plenty of postings yesterday watching those inventories drop like a rock. And I think especially in the United States, I think with the $7,500 reduction, that is going to be like the chief Christmas present for a lot of people that ordinarily wouldn't have. And that inventory that is lagging, I think is going to be basically eviscerated by the end of the year. But at much lower margins. So I think, like the projections of deliveries, I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised on the upside, and we're going to be depressingly surprised on the downside in margins. That's kind of what I would expect.
So I would push back on that a little bit. While we do that, producer wife, I sent you a link in the private chat. Please bring this up when you get a chance. And then on the days of data to show box on the top, if you could put 90 and hit go and display the chart, that would be amazing. Thank you. So I think the margins are depressed if his because he qualified it. He said we were going to go profit or volume versus profit if there's a recession like 2009, if there is a economic condition like 2009. So to me, it's like like between a hard and a rock, like a rock and a hard place, or whatever that that thing is. We're going to go volume, and so if that means eating into the margin, fine. There could be a situation though, and this is sort of up for debate, and we can talk about this in our private thing. Is like, what if that doesn't happen and it's just an okay economy or like a recession that's not that bad? Then what is the deal then? So we can debate that, and then this talking about your inventory question. This is a website that's created by our. Let me send it to producer wife so you can plug his tweet as well. There's a tweet. This is total new inventory. So somebody tracks real time, maybe not real time, maybe every like couple hours, the amount of cars in inventory for Tesla by day, and for the last I guess 20 or so days or 60 or so days. So you can see in the last couple of days since Tesla came out and said, "Hey, $7,500 credit," the new inventory has almost gone down in half, so like 40% or so. So this is a pretty promising sign that says, "Hey, there is demand out there at the right price levels." What's interesting about this though is like come January 1st, that $7,500 come right back to Tesla through the EV tax credit, right? So essentially, they're going to be able, theoretically, if this demand level sustains through the remainder of next year, we have a data point that says people are willing to buy the car for this price. People are willing to buy the car for this price, and if they can do this for the entire year, that's zero impact to margin in the U.S. And I think that's a very promising sign. But we'll see. I mean, it's going to be tough to tell what's going to happen over time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think the calculation changes. Like you're saying, it's basically basic supply and demand. And the thought of like as the price comes down, the demand increases, obviously. And so I think Elon's just trying to balance, or Tesla's trying to balance that by manipulating or changing the stock price. And so if the price goes down, they sell more. So volumetrically, they sell more. So like even though the margin might be down, their total profits could relatively be the same.
I guess the wild card is China, because China
That's
seems like it's New York City in 2021, the beginning of COVID. If you look at the reports out of China right now, it looks like the beginning of COVID in the United States. And that's a huge market. And, they were always obviously having economic issues in China previously with the shitstorm that they're entering now. That's going to be a drag. It won't be forever, but it'll be a drag, at least in the short term.
Yeah, if
there's
you look at their
Sorry, Ola.
Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
And if you look at their inventory, as the number of cars increases, from year to year, Tesla's going to continue to deliver more cars. Their buffer or their existing inventory will probably increase as well as they scale up. But it looks like, just based off of this chart and the conversations we're having now, is that inventory might have outpaced their growth rate. Therefore, they're incentivizing, to lower that buffer or the existing inventory.
Well, I think a lot of that is actually let's hit this real quick. So Borghan was talking about COVID in China. China estimates COVID surge is infecting 37 million people a day. Minutes from top health body meetings show scale of hits so far. Virus unleashed in China after 3 years of keeping it out, right? So that's one of the downfalls of this zero COVID policy that a lot of folks were debating, is like, you're going to have to deal with it at some point. and China decided to deal with it almost 3 years later. And so this has to run through the system. What's scary about this is that it's not just like, obviously people's lives are at risk. That sucks big time. But you also think about they're already in a precarious position because of the shutdowns for 2 years, and then you're deciding to then unleash this thing on top of that. What is that going to do for near and medium term demand? Q1 in China might be a complete disaster because everybody's literally sick. No one's going to be able to work.
You know, it's not just that. With the sheer number of cases, unfortunately, it's going to spin out a bunch of new variants too. That's what happens. And we're probably going to experience new variants, you know, sometime this year that are rising out of China.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's the panel thinking? Any thoughts to continue forward from there? Because I have a few things that I want to cover. Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. So the 3 things that came up to me from the discussion, and I had my freaking tweet up, and I took it away because I'm an amateur. Where is this tweet?
While you're doing that, I could jump in on another thought. So,
Please.
do we feel like the Giga Shanghai rumors are kind of muted now around them slowing down production and reducing shifts and that kind of stuff? Has that been kind of just?
So the question is what?
So there were rumors around Shanghai, the factory, reducing hours and reducing output. And so my question is, has that dissipated?
I haven't heard any additional rumors since the first one. I think the last thing that I read was they're thinking, there was like a 11-hour to 9.5-hour shift. There was a shutdown for like 6 days or something, which they were going to use for factory upgrades. Outside of that, I haven't heard anything. I think this COVID piece is much bigger than whatever they're planning by far, because that's going to impact the entire population.
By the way, you know, we talked about short sellers earlier. I'm sorry, Olaf, if I jumped on you.
Okay.
We talked about short sellers earlier, and you know, part of the problem is that they publish false reports that stimulate negative sentiment. And again, Tesla, you know, we just see it every day. Short sellers benefit by producing garbage that impacts shares of stock, and there's very little enforcement against it. And there's a First Amendment right to, you know, say what you believe. Also, that also is a protective. But that false information really is a negative drag on Tesla and all stock, and it obviously should be an illegal practice, or at least declared an illegal practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was worth mentioning just because it sounds like at this point it is a false story, so it helps us to like know as far as sources go and information goes, like that's something that was false. So it's something that, you know, whoever the source was, we shouldn't, you know, believe anymore.
Yeah, I don't believe anything anymore. Literally, I just can't. I can't. My wife and I were talking about this, producer wife. Like I just believing is very hard. Trusting is any hard nowadays. That's why Elon's sort of mission of, like, you know, the maximally trusted place is so admirable. But then there's a whole debate of like, exactly, okay, if you want to do that, then you got to be impartial, because then half of the country won't trust you because of your politics, right? So it's like, it's very, very fascinating how the stuff is playing out. The 3 things I wanted to hit on the Tesla side real quick. So from the space, number 1, he said very confidently, and again, this is just words, right, that he's very confident Tesla will be the largest market cap company in the world in 5 years. So that he actually set some sort of timeline to it. I think the first time he said that was like, at some point, I see Tesla having the same size as Saudi Aramco and Apple combined, or something like that, right? 4.2 trillion at the time. So now he's like, yeah, in 5 years, I'm confident we're going to get there. Okay, so that's fascinating. So that was one. And of course, he could be saying that because everybody's pissed at him. So it's like, guys, it's okay. You're an investor. You're fine. We'll get you there. Cool. Thank you for nothing. The other one is one of the best. He very, very openly said that he feels very confident. I believe him in this, that Tesla is one of the best companies in the world, in the best positioned companies in the world to survive a severe recession, outside of like bread and milk, right? He used it as an example, like commodities that are used always, regardless if there's a recession or not, you can always count on X number of kilograms of bread going out the door every single day, because if we don't, humanity falls apart. Okay, got it. So he's grouping Tesla near that category at the top, which I highly doubt any other car company can say that, especially with their debt load and their cash burn rate right now, which is good. And I think vocalizing that out openly is very, very interesting. The fact that he's still open to the idea of a buyback within the context of a severe recession is interesting, because that to me signals that if there isn't a severe recession, a buyback is guaranteed, which basically says that there's utmost confidence in the ability of the company to generate cash flow moving forward. But again, this is just for people following the Tesla story. We know this by just looking at their freaking P&L and their balance sheet. It's not that hard to see, as long as demand's still there. And then we can talk about that too. And then, yeah. And then the other two things you guys brought up, which is prioritizing volume over profit and no more stock sales until about 2024, 2025. Those were my biggest takeaways. And I'm very interested to see, really, the biggest dynamic that I'm so interested to see play out into next year is this volume versus profit thing, volume versus profit. So now, so what that's doing to me as somebody who likes to analyze these things is like, now my scope has opened up dramatically to start viewing signals from a entire economy perspective to see if a severe recession is actually likely. So we all know the Fed's doing their thing, but then what about like the other car companies? So I'm going to be looking at every single one of their earnings reports. I'm going to be looking at, technology companies' earnings reports, anything that's discretionary, right? Like, so you and I would not buy if we felt like we were going through a rough economic time. Cars is going to be a huge one, right? So I'm going to be analyzing every single one of the car makers' quarterly reports as a signal, and then try to figure out where else to go. It's a very interesting time, right? Like, it just feels like something's going to happen next year, and we don't know if it's like the greatest thing ever for Tesla or the worst thing ever for everybody. Right? Kuba, go ahead.
Or a bit of both. Actually.
Or a bit of both.
Yeah, it was an interesting insight from Elon that with the raising rates, it will be a really bad time for anything that's tied to debt when you have to buy it, like house or car predominantly, but also any buy now, pay later schemes that will possibly, that all those companies are possibly going BK, I guess, if it really gets that bad. And I also wanted to touch a little bit, maybe it's not now if we want to finish about this recent Twitter space, but also wanted to add a few points about the previous one with George Hotz.
Yeah, of course.
But no, if there's a good time, or if you want to follow up on some of
let's ask the panel.
topics.
Did you guys want to hit anything else on the space that was discussed yesterday with Elon? Is there something that's missing that we should hit? We do have an entire hour after this too in our private space, in case you guys want to hit it. No? Okay, go ahead, Kuba.
Yeah, so I saw this rumor that George decided to leave. Did you guys see if it's confirmed?
Oh, it's confirmed.
To finish the internship, yeah.
Oh yeah, there wasn't any good food. That's why he left. Apparently.
I actually, as a software developer myself, I think that he left because he was told quite clearly that there will be no refactoring. Refactoring, for those of you who don't know, is just working on the code and massaging it and making it a bit more usable before you actually add new features. And there's always a struggle between developers and management, because management wants to add new features. Developers want to refactor so that their work is easier, because they don't have to go into sort of spaghetti code, as we call it. And then they can add the new features easier later. So there's always this struggle, but Elon was pretty adamant that, yeah, we have to. I really enjoyed this exchange that George explained that, okay, so if you want to add new features while you're also changing all the backend to a new stack and then guaranteeing uptime, it's going to be very, very hard. And Elon said, yeah, nonetheless, that's what will have to happen. So tough love, but yeah, we're doing it. There's no other way. So I really, really enjoyed that, and shows me that there's huge determination to turn this ship around, because from what they were describing, they cannot add even simplest features because the code base is so messed up and so fragmented into different microservices, some working on-premise, some are the known servers, some are working in the cloud. So there's communication then is difficult, etc. It's a proper mess. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was quite insightful. And I'm surprised that he didn't do any due diligence on that before, because it's actually possibly delaying his plans quite a bit. But on the other hand, I think that he possibly expected that, and he was mostly interested in the users, and he was expecting to rewrite whole of Twitter anyway at some point.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking was happening, was basically they were going to do the fundamentals, building blocks. I'm sorry if I don't speak the right terms here, but like they were going to basically rewrite the foundation of Twitter. That way they could vertically, add those features faster. But it sounds like, based off of what you picked up from that conversation with George and Elon, that they're trying to do both at the same time. And yeah, I could definitely see why that would be super frustrating.
Yeah, I think it's par for the course on how what I saw when I was working at Tesla is like, we don't care how hard it is, we have to do it. You figure out how to do this thing, but I only have sticks and stones. At least you have something. Like that's the mentality, right? I do think it's a user-based thing. I really do think that Twitter, there's no way that, I mean, him and Jack are friends. Jack ran Twitter. I mean, he may have been an absent CEO for a portion of it, but I'm sure he knows, he has an idea of how big of a mess the code is. And there's no way, behind the scenes, I just read your message. There's no way behind the scenes that, they're not talking to each other and saying, Elon, dude, like this thing sucks, bro. Like the code sucks. They're buddies. And Elon's like, what? Did you try this? Did you try this? Did you try this? Yeah, but it's so hard. It's like, I can't get people to figure out. What's more frustrating here, like, check this. This is how bad the previous Twitter management is. And I'm not talking about the 8,000 or the 6,000 people that were laid off or left. I'm talking about probably like 5 or 10 leaders at the company that are just straight terrible business leaders. Has Twitter changed anything in the last 5 years, right? Imagine all that time you had to clean that code up and you didn't. And you didn't release anything new. What were those 8,000 people doing? What's happening in that company? It's become so clear that the previous management at that company was awful. Awful. I'm not going to talk about them as people or humans, but as business leaders, completely awful. It's unacceptable, right? So, but I'm 100% sure he knew that. I'm 100% sure he knew that. And it's clear that it's a network effect play. And one could argue that 44 billion, I mean, all the attention he's getting from this whole thing is like wild, right? He's always in the news, it seems like, at least in the US. I don't know if that's the case in Poland and other parts of the world. And this is, I'm actually so interested to hear y'all talk about this, because we have Remo from Switzerland and Kuba from Poland. Like, there's a lot of news with Elon Musk and a lot of the mainstream media sites. There's a lot of drama, but actually, let me just ask you guys, what's the tone of Elon Musk in y'all's countries? Like, do you keep up with your media at all? What are people saying? Maybe we'll go Remo first and then Kuba. What's the vibe?
Yeah, that was actually really interesting. So he's really a lot in the news here as well, in the German-speaking part of Europe, and also Switzerland, for example. I found out about the poll whether he should leave Twitter as CEO. I found that on the local news site, so it was featured really prominently. And so he's discussed. I think he's not as negatively discussed here as possibly in other parts of the world. But I think especially in Germany with the legacy car industry, of course, I think he's also really critically discussed. I did a really interesting interview with Alex Vogt this week about that. But here in Switzerland, I think it's more neutral, but he's really a lot in the news.
Got it. Switzerland, the ever neutral country. Kuba, what about you? Thank you, Lizard.
And Poland, in my tech-savvy cycles, people are quite interested in what's happening in the States, and they use Twitter. So my personal perspective is a bit skewed. But all the people that don't follow Elon or Tesla too closely, they just rely on the headlines from the media that has a negative bias, right? So then I have to explain to them, no, it's actually not how it works. Like he didn't ban the journalists because they were criticizing them. He banned them because of the flight tracking, etc. And it's actually quite a serious risk because his child was in danger, and that's when he had enough, for example. And yeah, it's always a struggle because those headlines are quite terrible. But the general public in Poland, I think that they couldn't care less about what's happening on Twitter, and I kind of believe that it's like that all over the world, to be honest. So that's why, yeah, I don't think that globally Tesla's demand is much affected by whatever Elon is doing on Twitter. But that said, the States is still a big market, so it definitely has an effect. But I don't think it extends much beyond the States and possibly Great Britain.
Yeah, I don't see. I mean, I've tried to test this theory a lot, and it's hard to quantify because it's such a nebulous, like, political, emotional concept, and those things are like impossible to quantify. I was on Dave's channel and we talked about, like, the science versus the philosophy. This is like where both are coming together now, right? Like how people feel and how what people's moral compass is like, it's very different than sitting down and studying physics. Like, nobody knows what the hell's going on, right? But what pops into mind is like, okay, would Mr. Beast, who has 122 million followers on YouTube, whose his audience is predominantly young people, but it's gigantic. It's 100% entertainment. Would he come out on Twitter and say, "Hey, Elon, can I be the next Twitter CEO?" if Elon was a toxic brand? I don't think so. If you get your YouTube channel to 122 million people, you're probably really good at business. You know what you're doing. Would you associate yourself with something that you think it's going to diminish your brand? I don't think so. I really don't think so. That's number one. Number two, Marques Brownlee, who has the channel MKBHD. He also has Autofocus, brand new channel. If y'all don't know who MKBHD is, please go check it out. Probably the best tech reporter out there, in my opinion. There's so many great ones. Linus Tech Tips is another one. He's phenomenal. There's so many. And a couple of days ago, he came out with a review, a 30,000-mile review of the Model S Plaid. And right in the thick of this craziness with Elon. And he called it my favorite daily driver ever. I love this car. It's amazing. Would somebody with 18 million subscribers on YouTube and a huge platform associate themselves with a toxic brand? Right? Like, these are the kind of things I'm trying to test here. And so I think I've really come to the conclusion that Elon Musk as a brand and Tesla as a brand are two completely different things. Two completely different things. There is some overlap between one and the other, and there is a significant portion of the investing base in Tesla and the customer base, especially the legacy customer base, that I think intertwine those two, right or wrong. I just think this is what I'm observing. And they view Elon Musk as an individual, as somebody that has been aspirational and very humanitarian and unifying over time. And now he's becoming a little bit more divisive, and he's saying some stuff that's unbecoming of somebody that is holding that role, right? But then that they're conflating the Tesla story at the same time, or it's being conflated. Like, I don't want to speak for other people. I feel like it's being conflated. And so as an investor, as a Tesla investor, what I'm trying my hardest to do is say, is my personal opinion of Elon going to change Tesla's trajectory? And so far, I just don't see anything remotely close that's where that's the case. And for example, today's data with them lowering the price to $7,500 to get ready for the IRA tax credit. My God, it's like half the inventory is gone in the US. Would people that were upset about the brand really do that? No. So what's the signal? People don't care, or they put a value proposition over moral compass, right? And I think the number of people that are going to vote with their moral compass, right or wrong. I'm not going to tell people how to think here. Like, everybody's correct in a sense. But the percentage of the population that can afford or is willing to do that, I think, is single-digit percent at best in the United States, and fractional digit percentage globally, right? Most people, I don't think they have the time to figure out if the thing they're buying is being made by somebody that aligns with their moral compass. I think ultimately it's value proposition first. And so as an investor, that's what I look at. And so now, could this mean that over time, maybe in 5 to 10 years, if Elon goes down this path of, say, divisive rhetoric and picking a side and not being clear in his intention, could this be potentially damaging long term? Yes, it could be. But so far, at least I really think to get to 20 million cars per year and to be the most profitable company in the world, none of this matters. I really do feel from an investing thesis perspective, his personal brand and what he stands for is a completely different story. And I think those two things have to be segregated and looked at differently. And I think like that's what I've been constantly thinking about. It's like it's hard to shut off my brain on that because it's like dominating so much of the discussion. When you get thousands of people in your DMs and your comments saying, "Oh my God, what's going on? Elon's losing his mind." I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. It's very confusing. So I'm trying my best to be diligent and figure out what the hell's going on. Those are my opinions. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts around that, but that's where I'm landing. That's where I'm landing.
I'm going to tell you my personal experience. And the question, I'm going to throw out a question. Can you buy the car and not the stock? So would it keep you maybe from not buying the stock, but you buy the product? And maybe we see that. My personal experience is, so I have a son who lives near Cupertino that works for Apple, and he thinks Elon's a monster. I have a son who lives in New York, who's a lawyer who would like to work for Tesla. I have a poker group that is right of center, California right of center, and some are actually Tesla owners, but they think that Elon's a knucklehead. And I see on local TV, and I've heard on the local sports talk radio station, Elon discussed and made fun of. So that's my Southern California view.
Okay. So are you drawing any conclusions from that?
No, just saying that you might get a different experience based upon the geography that you're looking at.
100%. I 100% agree with that. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Kuba.
Yeah, go ahead, Olaf. You were first.
It's all good. No, I'm also in Southern California. Borkan and I are like 45 minutes from each other or something like that. But so for me, generally speaking, prior to Twitter and everything going on, I feel like 90% of people didn't care, like weren't paying attention. 8% of people disliked Elon, generally speaking, and 2% are our circle of friends right now. The people who like are passionate about Tesla and get what's going on. I think post Twitter and in the midst of everything going on, that bigger 90% number is shrinking. More people are getting pulled into this, like hate on Elon. So it's more like 80, 18, and still like the 2% who are still pro Elon, generally speaking. But the larger number, that 90% or 80%, like if you ask the typical person, either they don't care, like we're saying, or they're, oh, isn't that the guy who, mistreats his people? Or isn't that the guy who, is crazy and like does this? Or, there's occasional people who are like, oh, isn't that the guy who sent a rocket into space? So that part's cool. But yeah, generally speaking, most people just don't care. But I wanted to make a quick point about what Farzad was talking about, and I love the Dave Lee interview. So if you haven't seen it, go see it because they've got some good stuff there. But if you look at like the dollar stores or Dollar General and Five and Below, all those kind of like cheap stores, essentially, that's been one of the fastest growing brands over the last like 5 or 10 years. And that's because ultimately people, at least in America, don't really care where it comes from. Even though, like, if you source the material, you understand where that comes from. It's basically cheap Chinese crap that's been imported, right? So the American public doesn't really care. Like, they just want cheap stuff, right? And I think over time, Amazon's another great example. Farzad's mentioned that on the channel as well. Like, people don't really care. They just want cheap stuff. Like, and so they're self-serving ultimately. And I think over time, that's going to continue to happen as the prices of Teslas go down. Like, people are going to just be self-serving.
Kuba.
Yeah, and coming back to MKBHD and Mr. Beast, this actually, I think, shows also that it's possibly an age dynamic here at play, that younger people are possibly more okay. And those are the people that those two creators target. Because that's who is on YouTube mostly, and it's the establishment, but not in the political sense, but of the people entrenched in the media and the local radio stations that were mentioned, etc. People who are like in positions of power, bigger or smaller power, currently, that don't really understand what Elon is up to and why he's doing what he's doing, and he just seems odd, and they don't understand him. So that's what I would point out also, that gives me hope, because that means that with time it will get better and better.
Yeah. Are you calling us old grumpy people, Kuba? Is that what you're saying, bro?
I'm 37, so I don't think I have the right to do that.
Let's prep a few questions in the comments before we wrap up and go to the private Discord. Producer wife, just keep an eye open. Type question before your question. We'll do a couple and then we'll go. Any other thoughts around this topic of brand, Elon Musk, Tesla, or anything else anybody wants to bring up real quick? Go ahead.
I was just curious, like, I was thinking there's a lot of buyback talk, and my thought is, like, what if there is a decision, and obviously we're not Elon, we're not Tesla, but, like, what if the decision is this? Like, is it better, or would you prefer to have Tesla buy back shares, or would you rather have Tesla invest in multiple factories? So, like Mexico, Canada, the other cities that they're looking at. Like, if you had that choice, which one would you make?
Is that an open question?
Yeah, I think it's a false choice, because they always mention that they're only going to use the funds for the buyback if they are not able to spend it in any other way, right? And they're spending as fast as they can, limited mostly by the people that are available, I think. So yeah, but if it were such a dilemma, definitely just grow, right? And we'll reap the rewards later. That's where I stand.
I think also that if he doesn't think they're going to accumulate cash in 2023, that's more reason not to do a buyback. I mean, if he thinks margins going to be really low and they're just going to kind of be in the same position, and they're going to use cash, and obviously it appears they're building a plant in Mexico. I think the initial costs I read were about $1 billion, with a potential of 10 billion on a full build out. But if he doesn't think they're going to accumulate cash, he's got to save the cash really for those factories. Once he feels comfortable that they can start accumulating again, then I think the buyback comes back on the table.
I agree with that. Go ahead. Any last thoughts before we do Q&A?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the factories are the priority, and the buyback is just a secondary thing. And most people, I think, would say that it's way more important to have factories and multiple factories than any sort of buyback.
Yeah, because if you keep money in cash, what you're actually doing is you're investing in the dollar, right? So the question is, if you can invest in something else, that would be more useful.
Suresh, thank you very much for the $5 super chat. He exposed the FBI, so this is Twitter files, which, by the way, we can talk about this in the private server, but blew my mind. He exposed the FBI. There will be consequences. There will spread FUD about him and his baby Tesla. My pushback there is, what have they been doing for the last 10 years? There's been a lot of that already, so it could very well ramp up big time. I could very much see that. So, but that's another great point. I think ultimately, I'm going to make this point and then we'll go to Q&A. If Twitter can become more trusted on average than the people trust their own governments in general, I think Twitter could become the actual town square that he's trying to create. But you have to cater to 80% of the population that trusts or doesn't trust their own government. Forget the extremes, right? If Twitter can be more trusted than world governments or the localized governments, then you can say, hey, what we're doing here is actually important versus what your political leaning is telling you, right? But if you're potentially creating rhetoric or divisiveness that's going to alienate a significant percentage of the population, that doesn't allow them to come to your place and trust it more than the local government, all Twitter will become is a political pawn. And this is what Dave Lee has sort of stated in his channel that really resonates with me. So the goal for Twitter is to be maximally trusted truly, but rhetoric is a big part of it from the leader, from the dude that controls it. So we'll see if Elon thinks the same. And we'll see if there's any adjustment on this. Who knows? It could just be like the play could just be for the next 2 to 3 years, get the engineering done, rewrite the code, launch new stuff in parallel, get it to 1 billion users, make it super badass, and then take it public, step down, let the public own it, and then let a bunch of engineers run it, and have a open source code and a panel of folks that make decisions that's pulled by the user base to make changes from a policy perspective, and then that's how you create it maximally trusted. I don't know, but it's going to be fascinating to watch. Let's do a couple questions, and then we'll go to our private Discord. Yeah, just so much going on. MC. Question: does Elon pull in more right-leaning and moderate people as Tesla customers with his actions? That's an interesting question. Ross Gerber actually did a poll on Twitter. Ross Gerber he owns a fund, for those that are not familiar, and he's a big Tesla bull. He polled political leanings, and I think 60% that came back from his user base was independent, which was an interesting data point. How do you guys think about this question?
So I'm gonna step into the boiling hot water here for a second and piss a bunch of people off. It's gonna be great. You ready? So I extremely dislike the Democratic Party. I extremely dislike the Republican Party. Like, I think that the divisive nature of having this two-party system is frustrating. However, for work, I was on a political tour. I hit like 25 or 30 cities with the right, Republican side, which is supposed to be like pro, Republican essentially. And so with that background in mind, prior to the Twitter fiasco, everything going on here, most of the time they were poking fun at Elon, right? And so recently, I haven't been on that same work or job. However, I have seen a little bit of more of my conservative friends moving towards Elon as a positive person. However, that's going to change again, like the next time he does what Elon does, so I think that flip-flop is going to continue to happen. And even though I think in the short term, there might be more conservative types moving towards Elon and saying, pro-business and pro-whatever, I think that's short-lived.
Any other thoughts?
I hate the Republican and Democratic parties. I hate them both. I think
I do too, by the way.
We're in good company. I think the United States should have at least 3 or 4 meaningful parties. I don't think we should have 25 like other countries, but we should have 3 or 4. And so I would answer this question. I think Elon appeals to more right-leaning and moderate people. Whether that impacts Tesla, I can't say. I don't necessarily think that translates to sales or not sales. I think it just translates to like or dislike of Elon.
Any other thoughts from the panel? All right, next question. The one thing I'll add maybe is I think his personal nature appeals to right-leaning and moderate, but his businesses very well have appealed left-leaning, right? And that's like the weird dichotomy, because I think from his standpoint is like, I'm just making useful stuff. I'm making stuff that's going to change the future of the world. And it's just so happened that how Tesla was executed, green energy, sustainable transport, sustainable energy generation, these are all things that typically the left-leaning political party was very much attracted to. But then once his personal biases or whatever you want to call it started coming to light, it creates cognitive dissonance. But what's interesting is that in a very long time, I watched an interview with Elon, he self-identifies as a libertarian, which adds another layer to this, right? Which says, wow, could people be complex? Oh my God, people are different things? No way. And this is like this whole thing for me is like, okay, just people are different. They have like nobody's one thing or another. That's why groups are so like frustrating. So anyway, next one. Let's turn this into a political podcast, should we? Just kidding. Jay Lizard, question. $1.7 trillion. How will it affect the market? Olaf, further invest in Mexico. Mexico is a car manufacturing gold mine near Austin plant. Go for it.
I think I understand this question. So 1.7 trillion. Is that the cost towards like gigafactories then?
That's the bill. That's the omnibus bill that was just passed. Yeah. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not actually.
Okay. Does somebody want to give their 2 cents? It's just that basically, I think the Senate passed a bill that has a ton of different expenses. He put up a poll on Twitter that said, hey, are you for or against? Most people were against because it was a lot of, just as usual, it's a 4,000-page freaking bill that no one has the time to read. And they just pushed it through because that's how the U.S. government works nowadays. But I don't know.
it's funding for the government to operate.
Yeah. So I don't know how the question relates to Mexico. So this one might be a little confusing, Jay Lizard. Maybe we'll table this for our private discussion because I'm having a tough time. Does anybody understand the question? Sorry.
Yeah, maybe we could reword it and try again. I am in agreement. Generally speaking, when government spends money, it's probably less efficient than how Twitter was spending their money before this. So.
I agree the Mexico factory is going to be a gold mine because labor is going to be cheap. It's close to Texas. There's already a dedicated lane. Seems like a great setup. And Mexico is going to invite Tesla there. They're probably going to be less environmental restrictions. They're probably going to get the plant up faster than they would in the United States. So I think it's all good.
Yeah, as long as the cartels take less than 10%.
This is the question that no one ever wants to ask.
Cartel Apple tax at 30%?
Yeah, the biggest thing I'm interested in is who's going to have the better tacos, Giga Texas or Giga Mexico, right? That's what I'm really interested in.
We have to send George Hotz to investigate.
Yeah, Fremont, get at it. I guess Fremont. Yeah, California does have a very, very diverse folks. A lot of Mexicans live there too. Let's do one more if we can. Let's do one more, and then we'll go to our private chat. Question: how do I post interest in being on a future video panel? I will spend a tip once credit card updates. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so the way these panels, perfect segue. Oh my God, TN, what a segue, bro. It's like you're like reading our minds here. So the folks on our panel are community members. They're supporting the channel through either Patreon or YouTube. Any tier that you support, it will essentially give you access to our private Discord, and then we use our private Discord to have. Honestly, guys, like I'm so proud of the community we're building because the kind of discussions that we have in there are so high quality. I think I would like to think it's one of the best places for folks that are really interested in the Tesla and Elon Musk sort of story, SpaceX, not brought into Twitter. We might get into politics. Who the frick knows? Like it's just such a weird thing that's happening right now. But the level of discourse is phenomenal. And so these panels are meant as a way for all of us to come together, have these discussions openly to try to bring voice to the community. Because usually, like I've been called an influencer, which I hate that word. But like I'm just going to call myself a dude on YouTube, right? I'm a dude on YouTube that's making videos, and a lot of the Tesla community is doing the same. We're just making YouTube, and it's a one-way relationship. It's like, here's our thoughts. The thoughts behind these panels is like, let's actually sit down as a community and discuss these together, because what I might be thinking about as somebody who has an audience could bounce differently from the community. And that's why I think these are very, very important. And that's why we have a comments section so that the folks in the comments can also throw in their ideas as we're all talking together to try and flesh out the ideas and where we think it's going. So long story short, Patreon or YouTube. And with that, we're actually going to use the segue to say that we're going to go to Noah's segment now. We're going to call it officially because this was Noah's idea. Hey, why don't you it would be awesome if we do like a private session after the live stream to like continue talking about it, without a camera and microphone or without a camera in our face publicly. I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's do it. So we're going to go do that. If you want to be part of that, consider becoming a patron or sign up through YouTube. And any last words before we go from anybody on the panel?
Yeah, there's an alternative way to get on the panel. Just DM me and send me your bank account. I'll send you my bank account information, and feel free to hit me up. Thank you.
Spoken like a true lawyer. Thank you. Anybody else before we go? 3?
Yeah, I'll just add, because I think it wasn't clear also, that once you're on the Discord, you participate in the chats, and if you want to go on the video, just raise your hand and you're let in. There are no gatekeepers or any huge requirements. You just have to be polite and that's it.
Perfect. Olaf, Remo, any parting words?
Yeah, just maybe to always remember to take a step back, and in the end, I think it's all about the product. It's all about really, like this famous quote by Benjamin Graham: in the short term, everything is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. We are trying to grow an elephant here, so it will take time. And I think all of these things right now in the short term, Twitter and stuff, it actually won't matter in the long term. It's all about the product and how they will execute. And I think it will be fine. And what's the opinion of Elon, I think really doesn't matter in the end, whether people will buy the product or not. So yeah, let's always keep that in mind when we're in those discussions.
Great thoughts. Olaf, take us away. Come on, Noah.
I love it. Yeah, he said everything I was going to say. Go Remo. Go check out his channel.
Yeah.
And I was curious, Farzad, can you talk us through what the next hour looks like as far as Discord and how do we connect on?
I have no idea. Just go on Discord. We'll figure it out. We'll do a Tesla style. I don't know. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, y'all. Please enjoy this weekend. Take it to yourselves. Hope you're spending it in the best way possible. Love you guys. Thank you. We'll see you around.